occurrence. No pandemic included, but we really want to help you guys as the townships and township reps, educate you on a kind of a yearly basis of current events that have happened in Clermont County, planning and zoning issues that we can kind of look into, find ways to remedy those issues, and just kind of keep continuing education. So, my name is Taylor Corbett. I'm Clermont County's planner. I am joined with our speakers today, Harry Holbert, Goshen Township's planning and zoning director, Brian Elliff, Miami Township's planning and zoning administrator, Edward McCarthy, Pierce Township planning and zoning administrator, and community and development administrator, Desmond Mccarthy, or Mata. Our topics on the agenda tonight are our property nuisance. That will be brought by Harry Holbert. Planning and zoning processes with Brian Elliff. The Village of Amelia's Moratorium and Pierce Township's transitions by Mccarthy, as well as the introduction to Community and Development Block Grant Program, Cdbg, as well as the Clermont County Land Bank. This will be then followed by our Q&A that I hope you guys will participate in. Give us ideas of what to kind of talk about in future meetings. What are the issues that are happening in your townships currently, so that we can kind of try to address it with our expert panel. You may be able to get some of the answers to your questions that you've had for years. So some of the issues kind of are long-standing issues in the township. So we're here to try to help you guys figure out a way to solve those problems. Brief introduction to myself. Again, I've been a planner here with Clermont County for 6.5 years. Before that, I was in Williston, North Dakota, working for Williams County as a planner up there in the Bakken oil field. It was a crazy 2 years, -40 winters. Not my cup of tea, so I'm back here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I also was a graduate of Miami University. With Clermont County, I deal with mainly subdivision regs. So when it comes down to managing subdivisions that come in large-scale, small subdivisions, 7-11 transfers, and replats, those all go through my office. I maintain the Clermont County subdivision regulations, as well as create any updates that may need to happen to the subdivision regs as we move into the future and become more developed county. I also work with the townships kind of on a regular basis, answering basic questions that come in. We also deal with township zoning resolutions and updates. When I have time, I can put in more time and help you guys update your zoning resolution kind of on a case-by-case basis. I also help with growth management plans for townships, so kind of I'm your county liaison when it comes down to updating your zoning resolutions. Also, I am the county representative on OKI, which is the Regional Council of Governments for down in Cincinnati. The OVRDC, which is the Ohio Valley Regional Development Council, as well as OPWC. With that, I'll open the floor to, a reminder, the sheets on your table, we have a CED survey, which is our strategic planning survey that really gets the voice from you guys. It's not out to the public, it's really for planning and zoning people that are influenced by the township to find out what your needs are and also what your shared visions are for the future, so that we can kind of compile kind of an idea of how to do it. There is a scanned QR code. I understand that sometimes we don't know, but really if you hold your camera on your iPhone or Android, you'll be able to pick it up and it will pop up a Survey Monkey link. So if you have free time, take the time, I'll fill that out and give some feedback. With that, I'll open the floor to Harry Holbert. You can pitch best one. If you want to stand, yeah.
Okay, so, as Taylor said, I'm Harry Holbert, Township Planning and Zoning Director. I just came on in 2019 and came into, as most of you probably have, old properties that have been abandoned, vehicles that have been abandoned and sitting in the neighbor's yard for years, and we're trying to address all those, so we're going to on some new help from the ORC. But first of all, what I'd like to do is get, who's in the audience? How many zoning inspectors do we have? What about BZA and zoning commission members? There we go. Administrators? Don't be shy.
Just your boss.
Your boss.
Elected officials. So there you go. There's the ones who are going to be telling us what to do and if we can do things. So every resolution through Goshen Township is approved through my board of trustees. My board of trustees will tell me, yes, we agree with you, or no, we don't agree with you. And this is both good and bad, right? So they're going to get the complaints. They're going to get friends that they've known for years calling about the neighbor's property. They're going to get friends that have called them to say, hey, your zoning inspector is out there taking pictures of my property and I've had that vehicle out in the backyard for 20 years. So it's both good and bad. Now, what we're also dealing with, at least in this presentation, is basically a property maintenance 101. It's not going to give you every solution for every problem that you have. It's going to give you some basic guidelines on where you can start. The important thing is, one, if you don't have a law director, you need to contact the prosecutor, Clermont County prosecutor. She's wonderful. And I've got that information at the end here, okay? So not everybody can afford a law director. So if you don't, it's important to contact the prosecutor office. The other thing that we're going to deal with, these are some important numbers to remember. So if you've got a pen, a paper, if not, just send me an email and I'll get it to you. 505-87, grass and weeds. 505-871, junk motor vehicles. 505-173, storage of junk motor vehicles and the definitions of a junk motor vehicle. And 121.22, public meetings. All right, with that, we'll get into the good stuff now. If your property comes up here, please don't clap. You can see me afterwards, and we need to work on something here. So, neither the name nor the address have been hidden to protect the innocent. In this case, everything on this presentation is currently in Goshen Township. We are working towards we're working towards abating in some manner. And we're going to go through what those steps are. This one is an abandoned, dilapidated old structure, if you can't tell. It also has tall grass and weeds. This one, same thing. So, also, just for the record, we are what they refer to as, well, they refer to us a lot of things, but the nice thing is complaint-based, okay? We don't go out looking for trouble and find it. So it's neighbors calling us, it's elected officials calling us, it's real estate agents trying to sell a home right next to that property calling us. So we have a lot of people helping us do our job. Again, this is just another example. This is one, this was really messy. We actually had the nerve to take it to BZA and argue the fact that it wasn't a nuisance property. They lost. So anyway, we're going to be cleaning up that one too. Tall grass, debris, in this case garbage. There is a difference between garbage and debris. Debris could be a tree limb, it could be engine parts, tractors that aren't working. Garbage is basically what you're going to put in the garbage, like food waste and those types of things. So there's ORC definitions for the term garbage. So you can't call that junk motor vehicle there garbage. This one has a little bit of everything. So it's got, 2 junk motor vehicles. Again, per the ORC, there's a definition, there's 3 criteria, and we're gonna go through those. Tall grass and weeds, the dilapidated structure, and in talking to the prosecutors, we're going to determine that camper as debris. Not garbage, but debris. This is the one that everybody continues to tell us about, that we've seen for 13 years. This is the Combs property, and, as
How's it
many of you
working out?
may have heard. I didn't hear that.
How's it working out?
He's in jail.
Well, it still looks like that, but we've had a lot of other agencies involved, and he's doing time in prison. He's also got fines of $1.49 million. We're hoping to get some help from the county on ground fill, cleanup, but this is one of those. Now, here's what happened. He started dumping stuff, as you can tell. That's to the point where the county and some other agencies got involved and they blocked off his access. They said, you can't access that property anymore for dumping. So he said, okay, I'm gonna go to my house and dump it. So basically, this is 1779 Parker Road, for anybody interested. This is, and this by no means shows you the extent of the garbage and debris that's on this property. Those containers there, they're lined up the full length of the property, it's over 1,000 feet long. The whole back of the property is filled up, so now, you know what all the hubbub was about in regards to, what is this guy doing? Well, that's what he's been doing. So how do we address that? Well, what Goshen Township does, and every township's different, it depends on what you have in place. You may not have anything in place, which means if you want to address property maintenance, you need to have some type of, let's just call it laws and regulations on how to deal with it. In this case, our laws and bylaws basically address, we send them out some type of notification. This is an extra step. This is a courtesy letter. So this is us saying, hey, we got a complaint, we went by your property and it's in violation. More nice at this point, okay? So, and then we spell it out. These are things that we have to do for the ORC. We spell out what the items are in our code. So 302.1 addresses sanitation. We say the yard is to be cleared of all garbage and debris. Also, item 302.4, weeds. All grass, weeds, and debris is to be abated. Now, how they choose to abate that is totally up to them. I've had people say, well, then I'll burn up the whole damn yard. I don't care. As long as you get rid of the tall grass and weeds, that's, you gotta deal with the fire department at that point. Our next level is our violation letter. So, the big bold red there says, review your property maintenance and or your zoning resolution. The reason I got that so it stands out is you can't just make this up. The wording is very specific for the ORC on what you have to put in that letter. You have to give them a timeline. You have to give them, if they're property maintenance, you have to give them the right to appeal. And we have a follow-up notice here. Our follow-up inspection will occur within 21 days at 12 o'clock noon. So it's kind of like the old gunslinger thing, right? You're just setting them up. So this is where the courtesy letter wasn't very useful, or it's for those properties that we deal with year after year, month after month. So first time offender, we're going to send them a courtesy letter. The property that's been like this for months and weeks, and we've sent them a notice already, we're going to go straight to violation notice, which is what this is. And again, we spell out the property maintenance areas of concern, we spell out the code section, what the code section is, and then how to obey it. This was the second part of it. So, in this violation letter, not only do we give them the whole breakdown for what the ORC requires us to say, also the parts about our code, And then we also send them photographs and tell them what they need to do. So these photographs are representative of that property at the time, right before this zoning letter was sent out. Okay, so we're telling them the abandoned vehicles will be removed, the trailer debris to be removed, tall grass to be cut, weeds to be removed, and so on. So this is just that property itself. Now, I'm sure you've all dealt with the person that says, it's my property, I'll do what the hell I want. Anybody? Anybody got somebody that just doesn't want to take care of their property, it's affecting property values, the neighbors are all upset, and they're wanting you as the township officials to take care of the problem. That's why we elected you. You are to take care of my problem. Well, this is how we do that, and I think the trustees, because we actually put this in place when I came on board, worked closely with the prosecutor's office, again, great support from the prosecutor's office. We came up with a resolution based off of a template I used before, and then now this is what we use for declaring a property nuisance. Again, this is all in the ORC. So, as far as what you're telling them, as far as the meeting, as far as all the language that's in that, it's pretty much ORC and the prosecutor, what they felt most comfortable putting in that letter to address our needs. And that's what that letter, that's what that is. Now, we go to a public meeting. I present that to the board of trustees. The board of trustees, okay, let me look at it. They look at it, I include photographs in it, and then they take a vote and they say, pass. At that point, the next day, I do all my recording, I put it in my folder, and then I make copies. I then go out and do what's called a posting of the property. I will literally walk onto the property, and I will take that to the door. That's called posting, that's an official notification. Now, if they want to wad it up and throw it away, that's okay, because I've got a photograph. And on that photograph, it has a date on it, and it shows when I posted it. So if they ignore it, at some point, we're gonna clean it. And then when they get upset about us cleaning their property, we can say, on this date, we sent the notice. On this date, we came through and took additional photographs, and gave you another notice. On this date, we went through the board of trustees, they declared your property a nuisance, and that's it, okay? And then we clean it, hopefully. Now, the next thing, before you can do all this, there's some steps, and again, this is a 101 class. There's a lot that we can go over, but I would take up a lot of your time tonight, and I'm to do that. Lien holders is a part of the ORC, so remember those numbers I gave you previous, 50587? That's addressed in this lien holder information, and what that says in 50587 is, I have to give proper notification. So, in this case, that's my one for the owner, so I'm gonna send him that in a certified notice. USPS certified, $7.20, okay? Lien holders, same thing. Now, here's the thing about lien holders. You're not gonna find the lien holders in most cases, so you have to have an attorney find your lien holders. So you call the attorney that knows how to find lien holders, and then they do the search, and then they provide me with the information, and now I've got all the lien holders. The county, the state, the recorder's office, the auditor's office, they all have a lien on the property. But so does Bob's painting. So does Harry's carpentry work, because I did work on it, they didn't paint it. So that lien's filed somewhere. When that comes up, I'm then going to notify all those lien holders that our intent is to clean this property. Now, most of the time, Harry the painter doesn't care. I don't care, I'm looking for my money. But the bank will usually care. That's if they have a mortgage. Some of these old dilapidated structures don't even have a mortgage on them, so all you're dealing with is the property owner. They don't care what you're going to do, because they're not going to do anything about it anyway. So, but as of ORC regulations, that's what we've got to do. Last resort. So, and again, the ORC addresses this. This is a newspaper posting. So I sent this to the Clermont Sun because my certified mails came back undeliverable. My regular mail came back because it was an abandoned home. So we have to make one more attempt to basically CYA in regards to what we're gonna do. So we posted that whole thing in the newspaper, had that vehicle, the other vehicle, toll grass and weeds, and it tells them, it tells the public that this is our intent, this is what we're gonna do. Once all that has been done, and you clean up property, you're never 100% clear because you're doing this to people's property. There's going to be a conflict. But this at least hopefully keeps you out of losing the battle in court. Okay, last one, raising a building. So, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I do have, this is the resolution that, again, worked with the prosecutor, came up with the language, worked on the ORC, went back and forth with the wording and what we felt would best protect the trustees. And that's our resolution for raising a building. Now, the raising of a building, there's public hearings, you have to give them the right to come into the township. The township will conduct a public hearing at the township and address that, and the owner has the right to appear and say why you shouldn't tear down their building. Sometimes they appear, sometimes they don't. Or if they don't, then you just proceed with the rest of the steps. Again, this is 101, so I'm not guiding you through the whole steps. But this is the biggest part of it, and that's a resolution and having the public hearing. That's the end of it, where we're basically just certify it. All right, so here's also some good information. And when you're raising a building, there's people you need to contact. Me, I'm just putting my information up here. If you have questions, you can either email me or call me. Clermont County Prosecutor's Office, Julie, she's great. That's the main prosecutor's number. Clermont County Chief Building Official, Bruce Price, that's their main number. And also the Board of Health, that's their link. So the Board of Health actually has, if you have a dilapidated, unsafe structure, you need a minimum of one of the following. The building official, chief building official, the health director, or your fire chief. Okay, now, any one of those three can declare it, but it's all going to start with your zoning inspector, okay? So it's always best to have all of them in there if you can. A lot of the times the Board of Health won't get involved just because they're saying, well, nobody's living there. It's no threat to anybody. It's just an abandoned building boarded up, right? But the building official, what I found in multiple counties, even though even the building code itself addresses that the building official is the one to declare that building. The building department doesn't always like to get involved because there's money involved. So if we're going to raise that building, who do you think the county wants to pay for it? They don't want to pay for it. They want the township to pay for it. So they'll go out and they will review the building and they'll write you a letter that says, yes, we agree this is a dilapidated, unsafe structure. We refer back to the township for any additional action. That's okay if you've got the budget for it, but if you don't, that's what the guy down at the end of the table is for. He's going to tell you how to get funding for that, okay? Any questions?
Well, we'll save the questions for the end, but thank you, Harry. That's exactly what we wanted to kind of start off or kickstart the meeting with. Something that is affecting all townships. All townships have some sort of property nuisance. This will give you guys at least the 101 class of how we should kind of address that moving forward. I'd like to introduce Brian Elliff with Miami Township. Brian?
Yeah, I think the bottom needs to go through and then we'll back.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yep.
And I'll just echo what Harry was talking about. At Miami Township, we also have a property maintenance code. We also use those same nuisance statutes that Harry was talking about. they're really valuable tools to deal with those really tough problems that we all run up against. And I'll also add, he mentioned Julia Carney, who is in the prosecutor's office. I don't know if anybody or several of you probably know Julia. It's unusual. She's actually a true zoning attorney. I've worked with her before. She was in private practice for many years, and she landed here in the prosecutor's office. So when it comes to things like zoning, enforcement, property maintenance, she actually speaks our language, and we couldn't be really more fortunate to have somebody like that. So I think we really got lucky there, and so hopefully we don't have to work with her too much, right, Harry? So I'm the planning and zoning administrator at Miami Township. I've been there for about 6.5 years. This is my second position in Clermont County. Back in the 90s, I had a similar role in Union Township. And I've worked in Clermont County, of course, also in Butler County, in Westchester, Hamilton County, at Sims, and I live in Anderson, and you can see there I'm the chair of the Anderson Township Zoning Commission, so I work in zoning all day, and then in my spare time I go do some more zoning for my own township. But I really love it, and I know there's a lot of zoning commissioners here, some BCA and of course elected officials and staff, but I can tell this group here probably, I love speaking to groups of officials because they are really interested in zoning or you wouldn't be here. So we, all of us up here are quite interested in zoning and property maintenance too. So it's terrific we get this opportunity to talk to you. Back when I first moved to Cincinnati in the 90s, I practiced zoning law at a law degree, but I had an opportunity to jump over into the public sector. I took that opportunity because I really do enjoy zoning and land use law. And at the job I'm at, and really in greater Cincinnati, there's very few true zoning attorneys. Julia is one that we've got here. But to have that as your sole practice area, it's unusual. There's a few of them out there. Probably some of you have seen them at your hearings. But by working at the township as a zoning official, I get to deal with it every day. And you never can say I've seen it all in zoning because there's something new all the time coming up. So there's two things I wanted to cover with the group tonight. Harry pulled everybody on who's here. So this is a perfect group because we've got some elected officials, we've got appointed board members, and we've got staff people here, and they all come together in townships to play really important but different roles in zoning administration. So talking about rezoning of property, all roads kind of lead to the Board of Trustees. It's the Board of Trustees, and Harry mentioned it in the context of text amendments, but rezoning of property, it's going to be action of your Board of Trustees that is going to take your zoning map and they're going to change this residential district to a commercial. They're going to take this residential district and adopt a planned unit development. They are the officials that have that authority under the Ohio Revised Code, and there is some process that gets the case ultimately to the Board of Trustees. But the whole point of all that process, and it's laid out in Chapter 5 of the Ohio Revised Code, is so that when it does hit the trustee's desk, there's been a good amount of process. It's been looked at carefully by staff, it's been looked at carefully by the zoning commission. So all this information, all this process, although it takes some time, it's been looked at by the regional planning commission in a lot of cases. It fleshes out all the details, it raises all the questions, So by the time it gets to the trustees, most of the questions should have been answered, most of the information should be known, so when it hits the trustees' desk, they're fully informed. So that's kind of the big picture of the whole process. Trustees are really important, that's where the rubber hits the road. The zoning commission, I have a couple of our zoning commissioners here tonight, so thank you for coming. They are an advisory board in most cases. That's how it's set up under our zoning resolution. So a rezoning case, whether it's a change to your zoning text or it's a map amendment, will go to the zoning commission. The zoning commission will look at the case, I'll draft a detailed report for them. They will have a public hearing on the case. Many times they'll go out and visit the property, and the applicant will make a presentation to them in public. Interested neighbors will have an opportunity to come before the zoning commission. So the zoning commission really does a lot of the heavy lifting as far as a rezoning process or a text amendment process goes. Public hearing. At the end of that hearing, and again, they have all the information, they debate, and they do not make a final decision. In most cases, they will enter a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. So the recommendation of the zoning commission, in most cases, carries a lot of weight because they are an official appointed board. The Board of Trustees appoints the zoning commission, and they make a recommendation. Now, it used to be, and this law changed, but about maybe 10 years ago, it used to be that once the zoning commission made a recommendation, if the Board of Trustees wanted to change that recommendation, it had to be unanimous. So one trustee, some of the trustees who've been on board for a while remember this, right? So one trustee, if one trustee agreed with the zoning commission but two didn't, guess what? The one trustee won that because it had to be unanimous, which is very unusual, right? Usually it takes two most of the time. But the state legislature changed that. So now, no, it doesn't have to be unanimous to do something different from the zoning commission. It's helpful from the staff perspective if the zoning commission and board of trustees are kind of on the same page. You don't like to see a lot of conflict. The zoning commission is usually appointed by the board of trustees. So in our case, for example, I see a lot of commonality in their recommendations in the final action. Regional Planning Commission, that's what Taylor is in charge of. We come up to this very room. There's a few regional planning commissioners in the audience. And the law also just changed fairly recently on Regional Planning Commission. It used to be, up until a couple of years ago, that townships were required to send a rezoning case up to the County Regional Planning Commission. That's just how it was set up. A couple of years ago, I don't know why, but the state legislature changed that rule. Today, townships, if they choose not to, don't have to send your case up to the Regional Planning Commission. In our case, for map amendments, I will always send it up to the Regional Planning Commission. The reason why it's important is in rezoning cases, but particularly with subdivisions, as everybody in this room probably knows, townships in the county are joined at the hip. We have a lot of shared resources. We do things, the county does things for us. Roads is a good example, but zoning is a good example too, and development is a great example. So I like to send our cases up here. Taylor will distribute the cases to the relevant agencies, water and sewer, building department, and get comments. So I think it's really good for our developers and the property owners who want the rezoning to get that early exposure, so we don't go through a lot of rezoning process and then it shows up at Taylor's office and it's like, oh, I'm not familiar with this, I haven't heard of this before. It's doing it's good customer service to get that information out there, and it just adds one hearing. And I think it's really valuable to get the commission's input on it as well. They have a kind of a regional perspective. So that's the regional planning. Board of Zoning Appeals. Who's here? Is there some BZA members here? It's a few. So the BZA is different. I'm putting the BZA over here by themselves because a really important board, they can grant variances from your zoning resolution, which means property owner says, I can't meet this. I've got a problem, I've got a hardship. They can go to the BZA, and the BZA, after a public hearing, can grant a variance from the strict rules of the zoning code. And there's case law criteria that you follow to determine if it qualifies for a variance or not. I'm not going to go into the detail of that tonight. They also grant conditional uses. Conditional use is something, if you think about something that you would normally see, for example, you normally see a school in a neighborhood, you normally see a church in a neighborhood, so you're like, yeah, they normally work in residential neighborhoods, but they have some spillover effects like traffic, maybe activities after, so they need a little bit more public review. BZA does that, and they can apply criteria and grant conditional uses. The most important, not the most important thing, but kind of a wild card out there from my perspective is the Board of Zoning Appeals reviews appeals of staff decisions, right? And I've had several of those come up in Miami Township. They're really, really important because the staff will be making an interpretation, you make a decision, and it's part of due process, right? The property owner or developer, they may not agree with that. So what can they do with that? They can appeal that to the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals has a hearing on it. They're kind of sit like zoning judges, and then they make a decision. The really interesting thing about that is that's the final decision. The Board of, because sometimes you hear, and you might hear, the Board of Zoning Appeals makes a decision. The Board of Trustees, who 99 times out of 100 has the final decision on something, they don't on that, and the Board of Trustees can't even appeal their own Board of Zoning Appeals decision. So it's really interesting, and it's a really powerful board. The trustees, however, are charged with defending a decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So sometimes the trustees still have kind of that control over it if it ends up in court. So really important board. Zoning staff, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. You're looking at several of them here. We write reports, we do the day-to-day stuff. We try to analyze or identify trends and keep it moving. We do the day-to-day stuff and support the trustees and the boards. Then just quickly, I wanted to talk about the importance of land use planning. If you look at the Ohio Revised Code 51912, it says that townships shall zone in accordance with a comprehensive plan. If you look at a bunch of judicial case law on that, that requirement really doesn't have a lot of substance, because the courts have said if you have a zoning resolution, we will consider that a plan and we will uphold your zoning resolution. But sometimes you will get into questions. There might be a conflict between what the Board of Trustees or thinks appropriate zoning. A developer may have requested rezoning, maybe it's denied, for example, and it goes to court. There is still a lot of importance of having a land use plan that's adopted by your Board of Trustees for your township, because the land use plan can support your zoning decision. If your zoning decision is consistent with your planning, that's really strong evidence that there's been objective thought that goes into it, due process has been followed, and we won't get into a lot of what you need to show in court to overturn zoning, but it's a really important thing to have. So what I wanted to just talk about briefly is, and we're going through this right now in Miami Township, is a lot of us don't have a lot of resources to go out and hire planners, spend thousands of dollars on consultants to get these plans. So what I wanted to just give you is a quick formula for doing your own land use plan. We're following this formula right now in Miami Township. You want to put together a steering committee of interested residents who can kind of be the driving force, and they will give you good input on types of land use issues, things that are changing in the community. And you have meetings with them. You want to set a baseline, this is a little bleached out, a baseline of existing conditions in your township. We went through, and that was one of the first things we did, was we updated our existing conditions map. For example, you can see the red is commercial areas, the gray is industrial, etc. So then, you don't really need to do a plan for your entire township, because you know probably 80% of the township isn't really going to change. This is for example, if you have a completed subdivision, it's going to be a subdivision today and it's going to be a subdivision tomorrow. So you really don't have to worry about that. What we did was we went through and we looked at Miami Township and like, what are areas we want to focus on? What are areas that might change in the next 5 to 10 years? What are areas maybe we want to change in the next 5 to 10 years? So you can take 80% of your township, maybe it's more, maybe it's less, depending on your situation, and say, that's probably not going to change. Let's look at our focus area. So this focus area is on US 50, which is near the Milford, it's east of the Milford Parkway, to give you some perspective. And that's one of the areas that I thought would be interesting to focus on, because I see a lot of really cool businesses there that are smallish. There's a lot of interesting things going on, but most of us, we just drive through there. But I think it's really kind of a neat incubator area. So that was a focus area that we came up with. There is then a public input part to it. Most of us are familiar with public coming to our townships, having public input. Maybe we have special meetings with public input, but a lot of times with planning, it's really not sufficient, because like, oh, we're having an open, we're having an open house on Thursday night, please come, and people are just way too busy to do that, or they're not engaged, or they can't get the word out. So something that is really important to try and take advantage of is use your electronic resources. It doesn't have to be Facebook, okay, I'm not even on Facebook, but we use our website. So on the right there, I call it a blog, and I just do a running narrative of what's going on. What did we do at the last meeting? And anybody can go and click on it. Then on the left there, anybody can go, and we don't have a draft up yet, but when we get a draft of our plan, I'm going to put it out there. And we are going to publicize that on Facebook. And then people can click on it, and they can look at it, and they can send me an email. It's that simple, There's probably more sophisticated ways to do the electronic communication, but I think this is a really simple way. Most people are used to websites. You go click on it, you can see what's going on. So the online's important, virtual input. We will draft up the document. We will have an in-person public meeting. Then we will take it to our zoning commission for review, comment, and ultimately, it's like zoning. Where does it end up? The board of trustees, and you hope that your board of trustees and our trustees have done a really good job. I have to say, some of them even came to some of our meetings and stuff. So it's great to engage the trustees if you can, and it'll ultimately go to them for adoption. So that's the quick, how to do a plan. It's really important to do it. I'd recommend you do that. And I'm going to pass the clicker on.
Thank you, Brian. I think that really kind of nails down what, the jobs are of all our boards, as well as I think using that trying to get public input has always been a challenge. Is trying to get people to, not just come to us when they have a complaint, but also come to us when they have just, an idea for the future. Like any type of public input like that, those are the public inputs that I think planners enjoy, because it's not just their ideas, because again, it's hard to sell just our ideas, but when you have the community behind it, you can kind of get things moving forward, and definitely through the elected officials. Eddie, would you like to go off?
So my name's Eddie Mccarthy. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator for Pierce Township, and I've been there about 2.5 years now. I've been working in planning and zoning for a little under a decade at this point, but I've worked in Northern Virginia, North Carolina, and Lexington, Kentucky as well. So first and foremost, thank you Taylor and Gail for putting this together. I think this is an excellent forum. Hopefully we can continue to get some really good momentum off of this. So the topic that I'm going to be speaking about is, in following Harry and Brian, it's kind of, they presented information that's going to be really valuable to you as like a going concern. I'm basically a handful of cake in the middle of like Thanksgiving dinner, essentially. This is just going to be bizarre, but nonetheless, a little bit of a change of pace. So what I'm going to discuss is the Amelia dissolution and transition as it pertains to planning and zoning. So I don't know, how many of you are aware of the Amelia dissolution? That's not familiar? Okay, cool. Well, for everyone who is not, so what happened was, we'll just say there was some friction in the Amelia village for some time, and it eventually boiled over. And when it boiled over, what happened was the community decided to dissolve their government and everything that goes along with it. It was the largest dissolution in the history of the state of Ohio, which probably puts it pretty high up there in the country, generally, for this, as far as dissolutions are concerned. Because not many people are actually dissolving communities in this country, aside from maybe portions of the Rust Belt that economically is just not viable anymore. So, November 5th, 2019, the village residents voted about 67% to surrender corporate municipal powers of the village. So that was through ORC 703.20. And what made this really interesting is that it was not only the fact that it was a dissolution, that's very bizarre in its own right, but it was also the largest dissolution to ever occur. So population was just under 5,000. So in Ohio, once you hit 5,000, it's like a critical threshold where it's almost a point of no return. You become a city, exactly. So they were right on the cusp. And what happened was they dissolved between two different townships. On the north side, Batavia Township, split by State Route 125, which obviously turns into Beachmont as you go into Anderson, that sort of thing. And our side, which is the south side in Pierce Township. So after the surrender of corporate powers, all resolutions of the township or townships into which the village territory is dissolved shall apply throughout the newly incorporated territory. Now, so basically, it's clear that probably no one in this room, or anyone who has similar knowledge, anyone in this room actually kind of crafted these regulations, because when you look at the map, from a zoning perspective, what you have is all of Pierce Township, which is all the red, purple, the yellow, and kind of the tan colors and everything. And you can see kind of on the western side, there's kind of like a donut hole, more or less, and that's the village of Amelia. And they have their own zoning regulations and everything to that effect. So when you say that, you know, the township's regulations will now just apply, it becomes a bit of a problem when you're talking zoning, because our zoning resolution doesn't really contemplate anything about Amelia. You know, we have general business, we have single-family residential, And those are the literal districts, and they're laid out on the ground here, as you can see. Amelia had a whole different regime. I mean, it was B1, it was B2, R1, R2, the whole deal, and it's all very parcel specific. So what we ended up having to do, since it essentially turned into the Wild Wild West a little bit, is we kind of had to deal with these issues here. So the Amelia Planning Commission is now just defunct. So in townships, we don't have a planning commission, we have the zoning commission, as Brian alluded to, and the BZA and so forth, just some different bodies altogether. Now, further, the Amelia Zoning Resolution and Land Use Plan have also been dissolved, de facto, sort of thing. And as I was getting into, the Pierce Township Zoning Resolution and the districts that we have in our resolution don't apply. There's not an apples to apples kind of way for us to transpose them. And kind of one example of that is our general business district has a 40-foot front yard setback. Well, the village of Amelia was much more urbanized, and they have 25-foot front yard setbacks. So if we were to just throw our districts on top of it, we'd end up with a number of nonconformities, we'd have uses kind of mixed and jumbled. And so we're balancing kind of that situation with the idea that development in Amelia is also it's not just gonna stop. There are subdivisions ongoing, there are PUDs that were in progress, some of them 40% done, some of them close to 90, that sort of thing. So all of that also being balanced with the fact that realistically you're dealing with a community that just rejected that 67% margin there, not margin, but 67% of them basically just said, we don't want this government, period. There's not a lot of other insights to derive from that, but you just kind of know if you work in government and a community does something to that effect, you kind of say, all right, well, we have to respect their position here. And if we're just to throw zoning on top of their community, for instance, there could be backlash. It's a pretty extreme circumstance, so you kind of have to take all these things into consideration when they happen. And hopefully no one in here ever has to really deal with this, but if they do, maybe we'll have a little bit of insight into this. But so some of the options here, and these were just general thoughts, kind of. So this happened about 6 months into my tenure, so I was still kind of learning a lot about the community in general, and then this sort of happened. But basically, we had some options, and none of them really phenomenal options, but options nonetheless. So the first one is pass a moratorium and kind of work through until such time that regulations are passed. We could conceivably, and again, so our legal director did a really good job trying to help us through this, and so the basic approach that we took with this, and I'm sure that Brian can speak to this a little bit better than I can, but the idea is basically we want to protect everyone's due process, but at the same time, we don't want we don't want nuisances cropping up and unruly situations cropping up unnecessarily. So another option, not a great one, instruct staff to review and approve, deny projects subject to substantial compliance with what the Amelia regulations would have been. We could allow development to continue without zoning regulations. So we could just pretend it was, the 19th century or whatever, and just let people do their thing. So what we decided was to put a moratorium in place. We did that on November 25th, 2019. And moratoriums, that basically the rule of thumb really with moratoriums is they have to be the absolute minimum amount of time possible to accomplish whatever it is that you want to do. If you start deviating from that in any way, it can become very precarious. And so our stated mission through that process was we were doing this just until we could figure out how to get regulations and a land use plan on the books for this territory that was just dissolved. Knowing full well that the community could come back to us and say, you gotta stop altogether. We absolutely don't want this. Now that did not happen. People seemed to be very receptive of our process. It was a very open process. We had a number of meetings. We have zoning commission members here as well as BZA members who were very familiar with this entire process. But we had a number of meetings to try and basically mend these things together. But the trick with our moratorium, which was kind of our enabling legislation, so to speak, was that it had a number of exemptions in it. So PUDs that were ongoing, we had a number of subdivisions. We had one called the Glen Mary subdivision, Woodside Park, and a number of other communities that they have platted lots. And you know, November comes and goes, and the spring starts creeping in. They're building houses, and we kind of were anticipating, well, we don't want to just tell people to stop for 9 months until we can just kind of get our head wrapped around things. So we had a number of exemptions that permitted a lot of by right structures, whereby we essentially acknowledged what the regulations would have been in many circumstances for accessory structures. The main thing that this did hold up, however, were rezonings, where entire redevelopments, brand new developments could have possibly cropped up, where we were thinking, you know, we absolutely have to have a plan, process, and regulations in place before we just dive headfirst into this. So that whole process took 9 months, started in November and ended in September of 2020. And just as kind of this is a really anticlimactic ending, but ultimately what ended up happening, what we noticed was we mended the regulations together, and there was kind of an alternate approach that that Batavia Township had actually taken. So Batavia Township made the decision well before this dissolution occurred, because this was actually not the first time that a dissolution was threatened. They passed legislation that basically automatically adopted the zoning regulations and everything from Amelia in the event that it were to dissolve. So when that dissolved, they just had the regulations just in place. They literally just took the books and started using them. From Pierce Township's perspective, though, in each township's a little bit different. Culturally, from a regulation perspective, and whatever it might be geographically, in the whole deal, we really took the approach that, you know, we need to be, and not to say that anyone, you know, that another process wasn't good or was bad or anything to that effect, but we wanted to basically have a conversation the entire way with these regulations to make sure that no one felt like anything was being snuck in or anybody was kind of being hoodwinked or tricked, that sort of thing. And the process worked out really well for us. We ended up with something that actually works very well, and we were able to kind of stitch them together. So it's not quite a Frankenstein monster of a resolution, but we are going to be starting our land use plan process as well, conveniently, and so it's a continuing, ongoing process, but an interesting process, and happy to answer any questions after.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I really wanted him to bring that topic up for you guys because, again, it's such an interesting historical moment in Clermont County as a current event that we, as the county, as the township, as Batavia Township, had to deal with. Also with Newtonsville, that was another village in Wayne Township that also went through, dissolved at the same time. So they're still going through that process of trying to get a zoning in place for the old village. Now, with the village of Newtonsville, they didn't have an existing zoning resolution. So Wayne Township's process is kind of just different enough that they didn't have the option that Batavia Township did, where they could just make a motion and, you know, take Amelia's zoning regulations and just kind of use them. They couldn't take the process of having a moratorium or, you know, being able to stitch in an existing zoning resolution. So Wayne Township is dealing with a much more complicated process almost with their village. So it can happen to any of your townships that have existing villages. Hopefully not. Hopefully all your villages are, you know, running smoothly, as smoothly as they can. But I really appreciate that topic. Desmond, would you want to break out?
I'll stand up, make sure everybody can hear me. I'm not a zoning guy, so maybe I took a wrong turn and I'm here. But I was on the BZA in my hometown of Hamilton for about 7 years, so I kind of know that side of it from what you guys do. My name is Desmond Leato. I'm the Community Development Administrator here. Work with Taylor and Gail in their Department of Development. I've only been here since July. I'm very new to Clermont County. I'm still trying to meet our trustees and zoning officials. But this Board of Commissioners wants to work with our townships, with our trustees, with our villages. So we're trying to get out. And I think the team that's together in development now, hopefully you're starting to see that takes place. So I was in Butler County. I did a similar job for 19 years. So the main thing we're doing here right now is Community Development Block Grant Fund, Cdbg. In 2015, Clermont County reached 200,000 in population, so they can get direct funds straight from HUD, and they get about $1 million a year. We're going to be sending out applications for that next week. It's good because it gives our Board of Commissioners the opportunity to directly decide, along with our trustees and villages, what projects those dollars go to. I'll go through this fairly quick. I got a lot of slides, but I know you guys want to get to questions. What does Cdbg do? It ensures decent, affordable housing to the most vulnerable in our communities. It can help our Board of Commissioners help local governments like the townships tackle challenges facing their communities. Clermont County receives about $1 million a year that are distributed to projects in villages, townships, cities, and nonprofits. So next week we'll be sending out our applications to, like I said, villages, townships, cities, and also nonprofit agencies are eligible to apply for those funds. So projects will be applied for. The nonprofits and local jurisdictions will be turning in their applications to us by about February. Cdbg projects must serve LMI people, low and moderate income people areas, or eliminate slum and blight. Now, LMI, low and moderate income, that doesn't mean tremendously poverty-stricken areas. It also means moderate income. So you could have retired people in an area, and we can prove that they may have $1 million in the bank, but their income at that point is low. So we try to qualify as many areas of the county as we can. And if you find projects, and just because it's not on our LMI map, talk with us. Sometimes we can combine some areas on the map to make it qualify. So we'll work with you any way we can to qualify that. That's a new map we just put together this week, and I'll be sending that out next week. We're going to have it online as well. That's what the census tells us our LMI areas are. So in general, the projects will qualify in those red areas. But we can qualify other areas. If you know in your township there's some other areas, if you want to do a sidewalk or a road or a playground, and you have a feeling, it's not $1 million houses in that area, then we can do some surveys and help you do that and qualify other areas. So if it's not in an area, we can also assist LMI persons. So through nonprofits, we help a lot. In Butler County, we did food banks. Here we're doing home repair programs. So lots of things, as long as you're helping elderly, disabled, homeless, battered spouses, all those qualify as LMI persons, or they can qualify by income. And then the third thing we can do with Cdbg funds, which kind of fits in with what we're talking about here today, is you can eliminate slum and blight. Now, but that can be done countywide. That can be done anywhere in Miami Township. It can be done in your Betsy's neighborhood. If we qualify, if your jurisdiction qualifies that as a spot blight, we can help with that. And we did a lot of that in Butler County, especially before we had a land bank there. We were always helping, because like you guys said, you got the court orders, you get your zoning all in place and get them their orders. But what would happen in Butler County is our townships would have the authority to tear it down if they didn't have the money. So we would use actually Cdbg to help them with that. Now there's some other funds we want to look at to help you guys with this as well. But that is always an option as well. Types of projects. Talk this week to people about dog parks, kids parks, community centers, bike trails. There's a picture of our sign up in Felicity. We're doing a sidewalk there right now. Firehouses, affordable affordable housing, we're thinking of some affordable housing, we're looking at that as well, already. Application process, they'll go out, next week, they'll be on the website, every township and village will get a hard copy application as well. You don't have to wait till you get the applications to talk to us any time of the year. Even guys on you guys on the BZA, talk to your trustees if you've got an idea of a park or sidewalks that are, deteriorating, streets that need paving. It's pretty broad what it can do. Look around your community for what it needs and projects that can make it better. That's my spiel on Cdbg. We'll do a brief talk on the land bank, and then you can ask the pros here your questions. So the Board of Commissioners has, what is a land bank? It's actually called in Ohio Land Reutilization Corporation. It's a quasi-governmental agency dedicated to revitalizing properties and bringing derelict parcels back into the market. It's authorized by ORC 724. So we can have a board of 5, 7, and 9 members. A land bank board always includes a county treasurer and at least 2 county commissioners. So that's our 3 members. I believe the county's going to start with a 5-member board. There's 1 board member that should be represent the townships, and all the townships will need to agree to that person. And then the 5th member, hopefully somebody with some real estate experience would be good, or something like that. So that application process, I think, will be on the commissioner's website soon. So if anybody's interested in being on the land bank board, that'll be an opportunity. Who has land banks? All the ones in red already have land banks. Cuyahoga was the first. It was a pilot. It worked, so now all Ohio counties can have it. 56 of Ohio's 88 counties have land banks. If you look, we're kind of in white down there. Even Brown and Adams already have a land bank. So we're glad to be getting this in place. How are land banks used? It's kind of like a community improvement corporation, special powers. It can acquire, consolidate, or aggregate vacant parcels. Clear title to land. Many times these properties, especially some of the ones that we saw today, you've got some title issues on them. A land bank can actually clear those. So it's just another tool for economic development, for community development. And so it's basically going to be another way that the county and our Board of Commissioners can work with the townships on all these problem issues you have. So we're looking really forward to getting that going next year. How are land banks used? They can take title to property, often at little or no cost, clean up cloudy titles and back taxes, hold property tax-free, secure property from uninvited guests, dispose of property to new end users with community vision in mind. Now, some people hear land bank and they think, oh, this is a land grab by government. But that's not what our treasurer. I've talked with our county treasurer. I've talked with our commissioners. That's not what anybody around here wants to use the land bank for. It's to help these guys in the townships out with all these issues that you see every day. Like I said, I saw it in Butler County. Some of these properties have for 19 years. It's one problem after another. They don't ever seem to go away. So we're hoping that this is a tool that we can help our townships and our villages dispose some of these properties. Powers of land banks, sovereign immunity from civil lawsuits. That's maybe a little iffy, but we'll see. Maybe our lawyer here talking more about that. Exempt from Ohio's environmental liability laws during ownership, so that's helpful. I know at Butler County, we were always a little concerned for our commissioners to take a piece of property that may have had some environmental issues with it because of liability. So that's another big factor there. Flexibility on site assembly, economic development, and renovating residences. We may sell the property below fair market value, can file tax foreclosure complaints, title cleansing benefits when tax foreclosed, and then expedited tax foreclosures on delinquent, vacant, and abandoned properties. Just a couple more benefits there. The funding stream, 5% of the delinquent tax fees can go to the land bank. I think they've estimated we may get for the county land bank here $147,000 possibly. So that's not a tax increase. It's already fees that are paid. So that will give us some revenue to work with to help townships and villages with the properties. This is good. This is new opportunities for brownfield and site demolition and redevelopment. Clermont County will get $1.5 million, probably starting first quarter of next year. This is for some of these properties you guys are talking about. $1 million for brownfield remediation, and $500,000 for demolition of residential and commercial. We don't have all the guidelines on that yet. I keep checking for them, but we don't have a lot as of yet. But the townships and villages have already submitted properties to us for the land bank, for possible demolition. This $1.5 million is going to be used in the communities that need it and on these properties that need to be disposed of. And if we can use the $1.5 million, by the time the state tells us, we can apply for more. So that's what we're looking to do. And it sounds like from Harry's pictures, we can probably use it all just in your township.
We got one property that's 1.4 million.
Yeah.
That's the estimate.
It sounds like a lot, but it's 1.5 if you get the right properties. It can go that way. Again, our land bank will be assisting local governments address nuisance and blighted properties. And hopefully, the intent here is to get the properties that are a mess and not generating any tax revenue back into a nice development, a house, and not the mess like we've seen in some of those pictures tonight. The land bank will only be working on the worst of the worst properties out there. That's where we need to start, and that's what we want to help these the townships do. This was some properties that are possibilities. These were kind of put together before I got here, so they may be some of the ones you see. Next steps, here's the steps. It's kind of a process lined up by the ORC. The commissioners have passed a resolution. The first step, we filed articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State. Then we'll need a resolution, another resolution from the commissioners. So we're about on like the third step. We're almost to the point of needing to get our 5-member board together, and I think there's another resolution by the commission. So we're, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have our board in place, and we can start moving early next year. Hopefully in January we'll know the specifics of that 1.5 million we're going to get, so we can start working with you guys on these properties. We're already identifying properties. The red dots are properties that our townships have already sent to us in the villages. I think we've gotten even more since we put this map together. A lot of those dots are concentrated, so